My experience started with a love and passion for livestock and animal husbandry, and from then I've developed more of a passion for how we can use livestock as a management tool to not only enhance our environment and natural resources, but to actually better the genetics and serve consumers quality beef products as well.
Carissa Koopmann Rivers, a fifth-generation rancher, raises Red Angus cattle at Curry Canyon Ranch in the hills of Mount Diablo. The cattle graze on forage across the landscape, which in turn benefits the surrounding ecosystem.
This property that I now run with, somewhat in partnership with Save Mount Diablo, a conservation organization that reached out and wanted to do some grazing practice. So now we've been here since 2013, and we've been working each year on implementing water resources. So we've developed springs, natural springs that are already there, and we've developed them in putting storage tanks and pipeline in the ground so that we can then move water to different locations the livestock wouldn't generally graze. And then we can utilize that forage better and control the animals to use them as tools versus just letting them graze how they would naturally graze.
In terms of water footprint and thinking about rangeland-based operations, which is what I largely work with, you know, from birth to farm gate, the water footprint, particularly relative to other industries, is really quite small. The rangeland agriculture, it really is dryland agriculture, and so it is, you know, dependent on precipitation, particularly rainfall and snowmelt in higher elevations. And so, you know, highly variable, also incredibly ecologically diverse, particularly here in California. And so because these lands are, you know, dependent on such a variable resource, you know, rainfall, not just quantity, but also the timing of rainfall, it makes them that much more vulnerable to increasing variability and climate change.
We run predominantly on springs on this ranch, actually springs and ponds. So the way the ranch is laid out is there's an upper portion basically and a lower portion. And we're in the lower portion right now. The top part of the ranch has a couple ponds and 2 springs. The ponds have dried up and the springs are trickling. So it makes it more challenging. We're gonna have to get more tanks down here and then we can truck water in from here. It's hard to come by tanks because everyone's in the same situation. This past season we didn't get any runoff. We only got about just under 9 inches of rain, and we usually get just under 20 inches in this area. So we didn't have enough runoff to fill the ponds at all. We need a couple inches, a couple inch storm here and there to be able to get some runoff to fill them up. So we dried up in May this year. Based on the drought, we've had to make several changes: where we're going to graze at what time of year, how we're going to supplement, how we're going to provide feed for them, for the cattle, and where we're going to put them. Usually we know where the water is going to be, we know where the feed is, and we rotate them in certain ways so that they stay in better condition, and we're also working with the resources we have and working with the habitat management goals that we have.
Rangelands, they're low input systems. Livestock on this landscape, they're grazing, they're consuming vegetation that's growing and reproducing naturally on its own. So we don't have typically human interventions of fertilization, irrigation, and cultivation, etc. And so then there's of course that vulnerability to when the defining resource, rainfall, is either, you know, inadequate or, you know, the timing isn't right for vegetation growth.
Here's some of the forage that will be available in the fall or in the winter when they come back. If you look over, we can see some of the native bunch grasses. They're always here, but on some years we have more, some years there's less, and it's just really encouraging to see that they're doing well and still thriving here in a drought like this. The benefits of grazing, especially in annual rangelands, is to be able to create habitat that was there and can be enhanced. Some of the pond habitat and some of the work we've done here is grazing around for clearing some of the pond area for the California tiger salamander and California red-legged frog, which are both documented out in this area.
What we've been seeing folks do, this year, particularly early season, is really digging deep into the practices and the resources they have available to them, and doing things like, reactive practices, so responding to the drought, things like culling deeper into their herds than they really normally would have. And can be a considerable impact to these operations because these animals represent years of management and genetic investment.
We culled heavy, we got rid of more cows, we're down to really low numbers. Red Angus cattle to me have always been, it's been an obvious choice for maternal qualities, milking ability, fertility. They also have a little higher heat tolerance. Our Red Angus cattle survive really well and they thrive in this environment, I think for a lot of reasons. We've been culling cows and working on our genetics since day one. Since I bought my first 3 in 2001, I bought them all for a purpose and a reason, and I analyzed them carefully. And moving forward, we've constantly been culling for certain things, including good feet and leg structure, because from the ground up, it's the most important thing to raise cattle that can walk and travel on steep country and steep ground like you have at Mount Diablo here.
We always hear from ranchers about how they can't just send naive animals into this landscape. And so when they have to reduce their herd, they lose a lot of that investment, and it can take many, many years to really rebuild that. So there's that, genetic loss, but then there's also the experience of the animal and how to use this landscape that's lost as well.
Adaptive management is key. So they just keep telling us it's going to be dry, it's going to be dry. So we just have to keep figuring out, calculating out how much water we're going to need. And of course, we don't want to overgraze or overutilize any of the area. So continue working with water, continue adapting to this dryness.